It's time to make it, just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Welcome to this episode of You Can Make It with David Farrell. I'm also known as the old fat guy. Today we're going to make marinara sauce, a really tasty Italian tomato sauce that's very easy to make, way better than the store-bought version, and it's easy to freeze and have around whenever you just want to have some nice pasta and sauce or make a Parmigiana or something like that. So let's see how easy it is to make marinara sauce. Now I've started heating a pot up here on my cooktop, and I'm just going to add 25 milliliters of olive oil. And we just want to let it sit over heat until it starts to shimmer, which just should take a minute or two. Our oil's heated up and it's just got a little shimmery surface on it. You can put a drop of water in it. If it splatters right away, you know your oil's hot enough. And to that we're going to add 50 milliliters of chopped onion and 2 cloves of finely chopped garlic. And we're just going to throw them into the oil. And we want to stir them just until they're soft and starting to get just a touch of color, which will take only a minute or so. It's only taken about 30 seconds to a minute, and see the garlic's just starting to get a bit of golden color. You don't want brown. Now I'm going to add to that 15 milliliters of Italian seasonings and 10 milliliters of basil, which I'm just going to push in, and we're going to let this cook just for 30 seconds to a minute, just until you can really start to smell those herbs. Oh yeah. You can just smell the strong herb smell coming off. It's ready to add the rest of our ingredients. And we're going to start off with 796 milliliters or 28 ounces, which is a fairly large can of diced tomatoes. And then we're going to add 156 milliliters or 5.5 ounces of tomato paste, which is a small can of tomato paste. Go. And we're going to add on top of that 3 milliliters of salt that I had on the same plate there, and 1 teaspoon or 5 milliliters of honey. Exactly. Just a touch of sweet. And then we're going to add 125 milliliters or half a cup of dry red wine. We're going to add 15 milliliters or a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. And we're going to add just a pinch of hot dried chilies. Just a little bit of spice for it. And then we're just going to stir those together and bring this to a boil, which will take a couple of minutes. So it just took a minute or two to come to a boil on this cooktop. It's quite efficient. And when it comes to a boil, you just want to turn the heat down so it will go to a simmer. And when you've got the heat turned down, you want to put the lid on the marinara sauce and let it simmer for 30 minutes. So I'll see you in 30 minutes. The marinara sauce simmered for 30 minutes and it's now done. That's how easy it is to make marinara sauce. Of course, you can look at it and you see I like mine a little chunky. So I leave the tomatoes like this. If you like a thick, heavy, smooth sauce, just put this in a blender or a food processor and puree it for a few seconds and you'll have a nice smooth sauce. But I like some chunks of tomato. So let's just give it a taste. Oh, it is so good. The tomatoes, of course, are rich and flavorful and have a little bit of tart saltiness. The wine gives it a bit of sophistication. The vinegar, a little bit more tart. The honey, just that little bit of sweet. And of course, the Italian herbs make it taste like it came right from Italy itself. This is a great marinara sauce. Now, the next time you're in the supermarket and you see a jar of marinara sauce and you're about to reach for it, forget about it, because you can make it.
In this episode, David made marinara sauce. The ingredients used were 50 milliliters of chopped onion, 2 cloves of garlic, finely chopped, 25 milliliters of olive oil, 15 milliliters of Italian seasoning blend, 10 milliliters of dried basil, 796 milliliters of canned tomatoes, 156 milliliters of tomato paste, 3 milliliters of salt, 5 milliliters of honey, 125 milliliters of red wine, 15 milliliters of apple cider vinegar, and 1 pinch of dried hot chilies. For the complete recipe, visit David's blog at oldfatguy.ca. Remember, you can make it. It's time to make it. Just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of You Can Make It. I'm David Farrell, the old fat guy. I'm going to be making something called pit beef. Now, if you ever traveled in the eastern states, you might have heard of something called Baltimore pit beef. That is beef barbecued in a pit and then sliced onto a sandwich with a hot tiger sauce. Well, I'm going to be making something similar, but I've changed it up and I feel free to call it Kootenay Pit Beef. And I'm not going to be putting tiger sauce on it, I'm going to be putting cougar sauce on it. Now, this is a great recipe if you're having people over to watch a game, or you're going to have kids or whatever for an outside barbecue. This is a perfect recipe. It makes a delicious sandwich. So let's get into making our Kootenay Pit Beef. Now, the first thing you need is a piece of beef. Now, I find that eye of the round is the only cut that really makes this well. That's what they traditionally use in Baltimore. You can use a sirloin tip if you're desperate, but trust me, an eye of the round works better. And what you want to do is take, I got a little over 1 kilogram of eye of the round here, it's about 1.2 kilograms. And I'm just going to dry it off with a paper towel. You want to get it as dry as you possibly can. There we go. All the surface is nice and dry. Now, the reason you want to get it dry is because when we put this in a smoker, or in your oven, or in a barbecue, because you can do it in all three, it'll get a darker surface on it, which is traditional for pit beef. Now we need a rub to put on it. And I'm going to make a basic rub that my barbecue friends call spog. And that is 5 milliliters of salt, 5 milliliters of coarse pepper, 5 milliliters of onion powder, and 5 milliliters of garlic powder. And just put them in a bowl and mix them together. Okay, and now we're just going to sprinkle our spog over the meat. Sprinkle it over, get a really good layer on there. You want lots of flavor on the surface. And of course, make sure you get some on the end. You want people to fight over that end slice. So there we go. This piece of beef is now thoroughly seasoned with a good layer of spog. Another trick is this really should dry even longer for the surface to get dry. So I'm going to put this in the fridge uncovered for between 4 and 24 hours. After that, you can cook it in a 400-degree oven. You can cook it in a barbecue with the burner turned off on one side and on the other. Put it on the side without the burner and get the temperature of the barbecue up to 400 degrees. But the classic way to make it is in a smoker. That's what they do in Baltimore, and I'm going to cook this one at 400 degrees Fahrenheit in my smoker. I'll see you in 4 hours. While the beef is in the fridge for 4 hours to get a good dry surface, we're going to make up our cougar sauce. What I have here is 75 milliliters or a third of a cup of mayonnaise and 15 milliliters or 1 tablespoon of prepared horseradish. Just the creamy stuff you buy in a jar for your roast beef. And we have 15 milliliters or a tablespoon of plain old ketchup, which we'll put in there. And we have 10 milliliters or 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. We have 5 milliliters of sriracha sauce, which you find in the Asian section of your store. If you don't have any sriracha sauce, you can use half a teaspoon or 2.5 milliliters of Tabasco, but the sriracha is better. And I have 1 small garlic clove that I've chopped up very fine to a mince. And we'll just put them in. And we'll just mix them all together. And there you have our cougar sauce. So this will just go in the fridge just to let the flavors meld together and the garlic give off its bouquet. See you in a while. I put the eye of the round roast into my smoker at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and I put my heat probe in it so I can keep track of the internal temperature. You can do it in a smoker like this, as I said, or in the barbecue at 400 degrees and under indirect heat, or in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the classical way of doing it, though. So I'm going to cook it to an internal temperature of 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'll see you when we're there. It took between 70 to 75 minutes to cook my roast at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Now this will vary depending on the size of roast you've got. This was just a little under 3 pounds or 1.2 kilograms. You want to go a little bit over, about 20 to 22 minutes a pound. That should be pretty close. But once it's cooked and you get to the 130 degrees internal temperature, don't carve it right away. Let it sit for 10 minutes like this one has. That evens the heat out and it'll continue cooking a bit to a little bit more well done. Now I have here a nice smushy white bun that I'm going to put some of the cougar sauce on. Give it a good smear on both sides. And then we're going to carve some of the beef for it. Now cut it as thin as you can, but don't worry about it too much. Don't be a fanatic. Oh, doesn't that look terrible? Don't know. Nice touch of pink, incredible juiciness. And you can see that smoke ring that you get because I did it in the smoker. You wouldn't get that in a barbecue or an oven, but it would still taste fantastic. I'll just keep carving into the roast. So we've sliced the beef up. Now we just want to stack a good thick layer of it on your pit beef sandwich. You need a good thick layer. This is a real hearty sandwich. And then we're just going to take a few slices of thinly sliced onion and spread that on top of our sandwich. And then we'll just put the top on, and it's time to try a Kootenay Pit Beef sandwich. So let's give it a go. It is so incredibly moist. The beef, because it wasn't cooked past medium rare, it's very tender. The tiger sauce gives it some good heat without being really over the top, and the onion just sets it off perfectly. This is a great sandwich, and the best part is, you can make it.
In this episode, David made Kootenay Pit Beef. The ingredients used were 1 kilogram of eye of the round beef roast, 6 hamburger buns, and thinly sliced onion. The ingredients for the rub were 5 milliliters each of salt, pepper, onion powder, and garlic powder. For the cougar sauce, the ingredients were 75 milliliters of mayonnaise, 15 milliliters of prepared horseradish, 15 milliliters of ketchup, 10 milliliters of lemon juice, 5 milliliters of sriracha sauce, and 1 small clove of garlic, minced. For the complete recipe, visit David's blog at oldfatguy.ca. Remember, you can make it. It's time to make it. Just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Welcome to today's episode of You Can Make It. I'm David Farrell. I'm going to be making something called blondies. I want you to think of a brownie without chocolate. Instead, they've got a butterscotch taste. And I'm going to be pumping them up even more by adding some peanut butter chips. Now, you can replace the peanut butter chips with chocolate chips or butterscotch chips, but I feel like peanut butter chips today, so we're making peanut butter chip blondies. And they're easy to make. You start off by making a typical butterscotch-based batter. And what that is going to start with is 100 milliliters or a scant half cup of melted butter, and 220 milliliters or a scant cup of brown sugar, 1 egg, preferably at room temperature, but it's not critical, just better, and 4 milliliters or 3/4 of a teaspoon of vanilla. Exactly. There we go. And once you've got them in a bowl, just whisk them together. It even looks like butterscotch. There we go. And now that they're whisked together, we're going to mix the dry ingredients for our blondie together. And that's going to go in this bowl. And what we'll use is 220 milliliters or a scant cup of all-purpose flour. And then we're going to add 2 milliliters or a half teaspoon of baking powder, 1 milliliter or a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 milliliter or a 1/4 teaspoon of salt into the flour mixture. And then you just want to mix them together. Just so it's nice and even. Now we're going to bring our butterscotch mixture back and put the brown sugar butterscotch mixture, we're going to add to it the flour mixture, the dry ingredients. We'll just dump them in. And you just want to fold them in until they form a nice batter. And when they're just about all mixed together, we're going to put our peanut butter chips in. And I have 125 milliliters or half a cup of peanut butter chips that you now want to fold into the batter. And once they're folded into the batter, we're going to prepare our pan for baking them. And what I have here is an 8-inch square pan and a little bit of butter in the bottom of the pan. And you just want to rub the butter all over the bottom and the edges of the pan. It's called greasing the pan. Now that we've got the pan greased, we want to make sure that the blondies are going to come out. So we're just going to take about a tablespoon of flour and pour it into the pan. And just shake it around to coat all the surfaces with some flour. Make sure you get the edges. There we go. And we'll just get the flour back out of the pan. Okay, so the pan's nicely greased and floured. So we're just going to put the batter into the pan. Now I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit because that's what these are going to cook at. Just press the batter around the surface. Now it'll be a little stiff, don't worry about that. It's supposed to be. And get it all mushed into the corners. Now, afraid I'm going to have to use my fingers. The spatula just isn't cutting it. Don't worry about it being exactly even. It will melt in as the temperature goes up in the oven. There we are. So now that we've got the batter pressed into the pan, I'm just going to put this in my 350 degree oven for between 20 and 23 minutes. And we should have some beautiful peanut butter chip blondies. Our blondies actually took 25 minutes to fully set up. And how do you tell when your blondies are cooked? Well, you take a toothpick, you push it in the center, and if it comes out clean with no batter on it, then your blondies are done. So I cooked them for 25 minutes in a 350 degree oven. I've let them sit on a rack for 10 minutes, which lets them set up before I try and take them out. So I'm just going to run a knife around the edge. And then I like to cut mine in for me, in an 8-inch pan, I like to do it in about thirds. And then about quarters. So you get a nice big blondie, no little cowardly pieces for this guy. And then, just make sure you cut all the way through the edge there. They should lift out. Now these generally come out quite easily because they're a fudge style. And you can see just how beautiful gooey they are in the center. They're done. So there we have a plate of delicious peanut butter chip blondies. Of course, the real test is tasting them. So let's just take one up. You can see it's nice and gooey. It's a fudge style brownie, or blondie in this case. Just take a bite. That is so delicious. They're butterscotch based flavor. The peanut butter gives a bit of saltiness to it. It's like eating a piece of fudge with peanut butter chips in it. It is absolutely delicious. The best part, of course, you can make it.
In this episode, David made peanut butter chip blondies. The ingredients used were 220 milliliters of brown sugar, 100 milliliters of melted butter, 1 egg, 4 milliliters of vanilla, 220 milliliters of all-purpose flour, 2 milliliters of baking powder, 1 milliliter of baking soda, 1 milliliter of salt, and 125 milliliters of peanut butter chips. For the complete recipe, visit David's blog at oldfatguy.ca. And remember, as David would say, you can make it.